Hi, I'm Casey Bell, and you're watching Writer to Writer Interviews. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Writer to Writer Episodes. I'm Casey Bell, your host, and today's guest is Joey O'Connor. He is the author of Among Kings, which is a nonfiction about William Shepherd and his life in the Congo. He interviewed me, I interviewed him. As always, two writers interviewing each other. Let's take a listen at our interview. Give me a short summary of your book.
Among Kings, it covers the life story of a gentleman by the name of William Shepherd, who was the first African-American Presbyterian missionary to go to the Congo in 1890. Shepherd was born in 1865, the year the Civil War ended, and it took him many years to get to the Congo because in the Presbyterian Church at that time, he faced severe challenges trying to get over to the Congo because the Presbyterian Church had never sent over an African-American man. He was finally partnered with a white missionary gentleman by the name of Samuel Lapsley. Together, the two went over, and along the way, they discovered that King Leopold of Belgium had enslaved the entire Congo for the rubber trade. So it began this long, dangerous journey up the Congo River, 1,000 miles. Together, Shepherd and Lapsley, they faced disease, they faced cannibal tribes, they faced mercenaries and Leopold's henchmen in the Congo. Ultimately, Shepherd spoke out against the enslavement and the atrocities, and it led to the first international human rights trial, and ultimately to Leopold's downfall.
Okay, what was your encouragement to share this history?
Well, you know, it was my brother-in-law who came to me 13 years ago, and he asked if I had ever written a screenplay. And I said, you know, I'd studied it for about 6 months, and I wrote one bad screenplay and went back to book writing. Well, then he handed me a book, and he said, well, I want you to read this. And it was this kind of a slim academic volume. And over the next week, I read it. And in that process, I discovered this fascinating time period of the Great Scramble for Africa, what was going on in America that time, and all of Europe's movement on Africa without any leadership or direction from the African people themselves. So in discovering who William Shepherd was and his courageous stand against Leopold, that's really what inspired me to write the story, to research it. But ultimately, as Ken, my brother-in-law, and I did the research, what we discovered is that even though this happened over 110 years ago, the current conditions in the Congo for the past 25 years, what most people don't know is that over 6 million people have died in the Congo in the past 25 years. So it was really curiosity that led me to this story, but it was really outrage in the importance of people understanding what's going on in the Congo today that have kept me in the story and kept me working on the project for so long.
Okay, so somewhat of an off-the-topic question. So you just said you were asked if you can write a screenplay. So have you been writing books before this book?
Yes, yeah. I originally began writing books for youth out of college. For a number of years, I was a youth pastor at a church here in Southern California. So a lot of my early books were for teenage and college-age students. I then wrote a number of books for married couples and wrote in different genres. So had been writing a lot of books over the years, but initially when Ken and I started to research Shepherd Lives, that eventually did end up turning into a screenplay, which won about 4 different screenwriting awards. So when that happened, then we really knew that we had a story to tell, and eventually it led to the writing of the novel.
So that just made me think of 2 more questions. So first, so would you say you grew up as a child writing, knowing that that was something you would be doing?
No, absolutely not. For myself, I grew up pretty much a jock and an athlete, and the arts and humanities weren't a big part of my life. However, when I went to school, if you can believe it, I was a Spanish major, and that's really what led me to learn the English language and the craft of writing a lot better. And I had a number of really good professors, and then it was a couple mentors that I had in youth work who had also written books and really just kind of guided me in that pathway. So writing and, writing the great American novel was never on my radar screen, but for the past 20 years, it's certainly been an important part of my life.
All right. So is there any talks of it becoming an actual film?
Yeah, we've taken that initial feature film screenplay, and what we've done is that we've now developed that into a 10 episode limited series for like a Netflix, an Amazon, a Hulu. We have the pilot skit, the pilot script. We've put together the whole pitch packet together, and so both with the novel and the screenplay for the television series, we're looking to get that produced.
Okay. Now back to your writing. I'm gonna combine these two questions together.
Okay.
So, other than you said taking Spanish, was there anything you can say? Because there are people out there who think about writing a book, but their mindset is, well, I don't have an English degree. I didn't do,
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what was it that made you say, even though I'm not, Stephen King or whoever, I can
Right.
still actually write books? And
Right.
how can you encourage those who have an idea of writing a book, but still think, well, I can't do that because I'm not the writer?
Yeah, and that's a great question that I get asked all the time, because people come to me, like they probably come to you and say, hey, I'm thinking of writing a book. I've got an idea. What was your process? How'd you get started? And so I think that the most common area for people to start is just a love for story, and for people to read often and to read widely, because it's really as we read, we learn story structure, we learn plot, we learn how characters are developed. So I always encourage people to first read a lot, and then depending upon what their idea or their interests are, because I've written a number of nonfiction books, and so I really try to find out what are you interested in writing first, and start where they're at and their ideas, and then I really encourage them to kind of take that large elephant and break it down into small bite-sized pieces. So to start with small incremental stories. And then once people realize that, like, okay, I've got some stories to tell, they can get momentum and progress by just writing one story at a time and learning, what words and what creative rhythm works for them. That's really how I encourage people to get started.
Okay. And then your last question. Thank you for that, by the way.
Sure.
Your last question, kind of to make you think a little bit. If you could have conversation with an author, whether they be dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Gosh, because I love to read. I have so many favorite authors. I will say that you mentioned him earlier. I will say that Stephen King's book on writing, if there's one book that I recommend people reading, it's his book, and it's called On Writing, and it's really, I think, one of the premier books on writing. So I would love to sit down with him and have a conversation about that, because I'm a fan of his work, and he's comprehensive. Interestingly enough, I just finished Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption. And The Shawshank Redemption is one of my favorite movies. Well, what most people don't realize, and I did not even realize this, is that book is a novella. It's only about 100 pages, and it's a delightful read. And all I'll say is the character of Red, the story is told from his point of view, but it's really worth a read. And so I know people are intimidated by Stephen King books because they can be so long, but that's a short novella and really worth a read.
Excuse my ignorance. When I think of Stephen King, I think of horror and craziness. I never knew he actually wrote a book on writing, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
So
it's a nonfiction book, and it's really one of the best-selling books on writing.
amazing. Well, please don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this message. And we are back. Let's continue this writer to writer interviews.
So Casey, tell me about the hardest writing project you ever took on.
The hardest writing project. It would have to be, what's it called? Actually, the first book I started writing, A Family of Strangers. It took, let's see, 2000, I think it was published in 2017. So that would make it, let's see, 14 years to write. But it wasn't 14 years of writing. It was like maybe 2 years of procrastination and then start writing, and then maybe another 2 years of writer's block, then maybe a year of, I don't care, I'm not gonna finish it. I'll just throw the book away. And it was like off and on. And the only reason why I kept writing it is because it just kept coming up in my mind, or I would just see something and think of the book, and I'm like, I'm not writing it. I don't care. I have writer's block. I can't figure it out. And finally, whatever year I finally published it, I said, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write this. And the thing was, I knew the ending, but I didn't want to get to the ending too quickly. And I also didn't want it to be a 1,000-page book.
Mm-hmm.
So finally I said, well, let me just write the ending and see what goes from there. And I wrote the ending, and the rest of the book wrote itself. So.
All right. Wow. That's quite a story. Okay. So this question may tie into what you just shared, but out of all your books, what's either your best book or the one that you're most proud of?
It would have to be, what's it called? Essays from Dysfunctional Families / Literary Betrayal, because I think it's a one of a kind. I don't know if I can research that, but it's 2 books in one. It's a book within a book. So I'll start with the second book. So let's just say we all have issues. We all know people with family problems, blah, 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 blah. But I'm a person who believes that sharing is better than hiding. Mm-hmm. So I had the idea of exposing, I was going to change names and everything, but I had an idea of exposing some stuff that I've heard, family, blah, blah, blah. But then a part of me was like, but what if they read it and they realize what you did? Are they going to be okay with it? So I threw that idea away, and I said I won't do that because I don't want to hurt anyone's feeling. I don't want people to think I intentionally try to hurt them.
Sure.
So then I said, but then I had an idea in my mind of me sitting at like a Thanksgiving dinner and the whole family making side remarks of my book becoming best-selling, but using their stories and being upset with me. So finally I said, well, let me just write a book about an author who exposed his family's secrets through a bestseller. So I wrote the book, but it was boring because all you heard them saying was, I can't believe you said that, but you didn't know what the that was. So the first book is his book that he wrote that exposes his family and friends' secrets, and then the second book is their reaction. So that would be my, I don't want to say best, but most unique, because I don't think there's books out there where you read a book by a fictional author
Mhm.
and then you read the book of what happened to him and his family and their response to him. So that one.
Great, great, very interesting. So what is the best time of the day to write for you, and why?
Morning, only because not just in writing, but in general, which I'm still dealing with it. I'm sort of a workaholic where I could go the whole day without eating. I'll maybe stop for bathroom breaks, but I have a hard time stopping what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I start at night, I'll be up to like 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
because I have a hard time saying, we'll do this tomorrow, so I would say morning, so that I can at least, and I'm learning how to pace myself and not do everything in one day, but
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely say morning, so that I'm not up at late at night.
Great, great. And who do you go to for inspiration as a writer? Who's inspired you the most in your writing career?
What exactly do you mean by that?
Well,
Because I think I might have an answer, but I don't know if it's what you mean.
it could be another writer. What writer inspires you most, or is there an inspirational figure that really has fueled your writing? Someone that that you seek to emulate, or find. Again, for myself, I read widely, and so there's different figures, where I admire their courage. They may not be writers, but so just inspirational figures, whether they're writers or just public figures, historical figures.
I don't think I have any. As far as me writing, if you want to say people, I would say Facebook feed, because I use people's too much information, TMI. Like, that's when I get writer's block, I'll just look at what people are saying, things that they shouldn't be saying, and I'll go, oh, there's stuff I can use.
That's a great idea.
I mean, I'm like this. If you're going to share it to the world, you should be upset if someone uses it.
That's a good point.
Otherwise, keep it to yourself.
That's
But
right.
I always tell people that if you get writer's block, that's the first thing you, I would say, obviously read a book, take a walk, and then the third step is just go to social media, and anyone who's giving too much information.
I've never even thought about that. That's really true.
And like I said, I always change names. Sometimes I'll change gender to really make sure they don't know that I'm talking about them. But yeah, that's people. I've always been an observer. So, and I think, and I didn't realize at the time, because I didn't really get into I was always writing, but I never thought I'd be a writer, because it wasn't a goal of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't realize it at the time that it was because of my writing, but I was always an observer. And a lot of people had a problem with that. Well, they had a problem with me sitting by myself. Like when I would go in class, I would always sit by myself, and there was a group of people, and I would just sit back and watch. I'm like, why are you over there by yourself? Why don't you come enjoy it? I'm like, because I'm comfortable, I'm good. I'm just observing. And so watching people and their reactions to, what they say, the things they talk about, the topics they talk about, I observe it. And when I start writing, I go back and think of all those things and the way people said what they said and how they reacted to whatever. And then I throw all of that in the book.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. So essentially your observations of people, whether it's in person or on Facebook, they become your funnel for ideas and, generating content. Whereas more, I think I'm more bent towards, like I said, reading inspirational figures or books or content where data is more my filter. But that's a really good way to frame it, the way you framed it, in terms of using people as a filter and as a funnel. Final question. When people read your books, what are you hoping they take away?
The only thing, well, it's difficult because I say I'm probably a writer for the non-reader. because I used to be one. I used to think
Okay.
reading was boring. And there's a saying, it says anonymous, so I don't know who said it originally, but it says everyone is a reader. It's just everyone hasn't found their favorite book. And I don't remember what year it was. I think it was 2011. I was trying to become an entrepreneur, blah, 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 blah. And so I said, I'm going to go to the library and just get some books in entrepreneurship and marketing and advertising and financing and money management and teach myself this stuff. And that's when I realized, oh, reading really isn't as boring as I thought. But I also realized the school system doesn't have a wide range of books to read or allows you to read. They don't really have a wide range of genres either. I never was given the opportunity to read mystery. I realized that's my favorite type of reading. I joined a book club purposely to force myself to read, and I got introduced to Agatha Christie, and she's one of my favorite now, which I didn't even know she existed when I was in school. So I realized reading is fun. It's just if you're reading something that doesn't interest you, you're going to think it's boring. So I hope that the non-readers picks up my books and realize, oh, reading is not as bad as I assumed it was. For those who do read and are avid readers, every book is different. Like I have one book that is completely silly and has no, the only message I would say it has in it is karma. You know, what you do to people will return to you. But most of my books do have a message that I hope people use to make better decisions in their life.
Sure.
Well, that is all for this episode of Writer to Writer Interviews. I'm your host, Casey Bell. I'd like to thank author Joey O'Connor for his time and for sharing his story. If you'd like to see more shows, don't forget to subscribe and to check out our CSB Television channel. I want to thank you all for watching. Have yourself a great day. Essays from Dysfunctional Families, a book written by Dean K. Brent exposing his family's and friends' secrets. Literary Betrayal is his family's and friends' reactions. 2 books and 1, uniquely written by author Casey Bell. Available now.